What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario, and today we're going to be talking about the happiest place on Earth for coaster enthusiasts.
Cedar Point!
Let's talk about amusement parks, like rides and rides in the dark. Rides right here and rides all over, but mostly coasters, mostly coasters. We'll talk about all kind of things, but mostly coasters.
Now, as you might be able to tell by my outro, as well as my logo, there, and there, I am quite a big fan of the coaster collection that Cedar Point has to offer. I think they have by far the best coaster collection of any park that I've been to. Since this park does have so many good coasters, I feel like this is one of the hardest top 10 lists to do, just because of the fact that good rides are going to miss the top 10. So I am actually going to start off by talking about the rides that don't quite make the cut. If you do want to skip straight to the top 10 or any of the numbers, you can do so by going to the timestamps in the comments. Also, this video is not going to include Pipe Scream, as I don't personally consider that to be a coaster. It's not going to include Wilderness Run because I've never been on that ride. And I'm also going to be ranking Gemini as one coaster, even though I consider it to be 2 credits. Alright, and at number 16, we have a ride that if you've watched this video, or is it on this side? I never know. If you've watched this video, you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of it, but that is Corkscrew. There's not a whole lot to say about this other than it's an older ride, so it's a rougher ride, bangs your head around and doesn't really do all that much. Next up is a ride that might upset some people that it is this low on the list, and that's Wicked Twister. The first time I rode this, I didn't have any problems with it. It just wasn't that exciting. I rode in the back row, so you really only go up all the way on one of those spikes. Also this year, aside from it just not being that interesting, I got some pretty bad headbanging due to the rattle that it seems to have gotten, so I'm really just not a big fan of this ride. Alright, now we actually start getting into the good rides. This is a family coaster or kiddie coaster, even depending on how you look at it. Woodstock Express in Camp Snoopy is actually a pretty fun ride. I'm pretty sure you get 2 cycles on it. It's butter smooth, and it's a fantastic starter coaster. Just above that, we have Cedar Creek Mine Ride. This isn't one of the better mine rides that I've been on, but I also don't have any issues with it. It is a little on the jankier, rough side, but it's definitely better than something like Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Over Texas. I really like this one part where there's a weird straight banked section that goes over the water. That's pretty fun. Alright, and another pretty decent family style mid thrill level coaster is Iron Dragon. One of the nice things about Cedar Point's coasters is they really give you a good stepping stone to work your way up to bigger and bigger coasters. And Iron Dragon is a nice step up from Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Probably the least intense of the 3 aero suspended coasters I've been on. But like I said, it's a good family attraction. And if you sit in the back, you actually will get a weird pop of airtime going down one of the drops, as well as some decent swinging in a couple spots. Also, sorry Iron Dragon isn't in my top 10, Becca. Alright, and then last on the list of rides that did not make it in the top 10, this one actually makes me kind of sad because I do really enjoy this coaster. Just when I rewrote it, it was on the rougher side, and this is Blue Streak. I completely understand it's an older coaster, it's going to have a little bit of roughness to it, but roughness aside, it has some really fun pops of airtime, pretty decent pacing, especially for how old this thing is, and it also hardly ever has a line, so this is a good ride to just take a break from some of the more intense rides and some of the more intense lines as well. Okay, we are finally making our way into the top 10. And taking that number 10 spot is one of Cedar Point's many record-breaking coasters of its time, Gemini. Gemini is a super fun, classic-feeling racing coaster that is a bit smoother than some of the older wooden racing coasters. And aside from that nice racing aspect, it has some really good pops of airtime, especially if you're sitting in the back row. Along with that, there's also quite a few really fantastic head choppers. Going down, I believe it's the first drop, maybe the first drop after the first turnaround, I'm not really sure, but just check out a POV if you don't know what I'm talking about. There is a drop that goes underneath this sort of angled metal, these 2 cross-section-y, I'm so good at explaining things, metal beams that look like they're about to you upside the head. So that's exciting. The one bad thing about this ride is if you sit on a back wheel seat, in my opinion, this is one of the roughest rides at the park. So if you do have to sit on a wheel seat, sit in a front wheel seat. But my favorite row on this is the second to last row. Good airtime, smooth ride. At number 9, we got a ride that I really didn't enjoy too much on my first visit, but my second visit, after riding it a couple more times, it kind of grew on me, and this is Raptor. The first good thing I'll say is that This has some really intense moments. It is a B&M invert. B&M inverts are typically known for being pretty intense rides. The first drop is really weird. It's not at that steep of an angle, but in the back row, you get a weird pop of ejector airtime. I don't know if that has to do with the quick, snappy transition that you get from banked to unbanked. And then the second really unique element, well, it's not even a unique element, just the way it does this element, I guess, is unique compared to other roller coasters, and that's the Cobra roll. The Cobra roll whips the living crap out of you, which could be good or bad depending on the type of rides that you like, but I really enjoyed it. Some of the negatives with this ride, I don't think it really has the best pacing. There's a couple sections of relatively straight track going over the midway where it kind of just meanders, so it'll be like really intense element and then relatively straight track. And also, even before the Cobra roll, there's just a really long section of straight track. I think my buddy Zach put it really nicely after his first ride. This is what he had to say.
Banked and then went straight, and then I was like, by the way, corkscrew. And I was like, okay.
But it's still fun. All right, and if you weren't mad about Raptor or Wicked Twister being low on the list, you'll probably be mad at me for this one. Top Thrill Dragster is coming in at number 8.
Why do you do this?
Because I am a coaster enthusiast, and any opinion other than mine is completely invalid.
In the coaster community, there's a relatively big discussion on which accelerator model is the best one. And I think this ride definitely kicks butt when it comes to just short bursts of intensity, packing a decent punch, having a really good launch. But there are just some things that I wish it did better. Obviously, the biggest complaint is the length. Yeah, I'm a fan of longer rides in general. I've had 3 rides on this thing, 1 in the back, 1 in the middle, 1 in the front. And the front row ride is the only one that really took my breath away. And that launch is just not nearly as forceful as accelerators. I know it goes faster, but it just doesn't have as much of a oomph to it. I do really like flying up that top hat. I think the 90-degree twist provides some really good laterals. On all of my 3 rides, I didn't experience any airtime on that top hat, which is unfortunate. And then going down, that twisting drop is insanely unique, but I think one of the shortcomings with this drop is you don't really get to feel the height of it. I've heard a few other people make this comparison, but it almost feels more like an inversion in the sense that you're focused more on flipping around as opposed to how high up you are. But still a fun ride. Please don't hate me too much. This is just my opinion. You can have your own opinion. Now to move on to a ride that does use its height to its advantage, even though it's half as tall, Valravn. I know this ride sort of gets mixed reviews, but this ride is super fun. Depending on where you sit, it can be butter smooth, especially in the inner seats. That 200-foot drop, though it may not be forceful, it's super floaty, super fun. It feels like you're falling forever, which I love about it. And also the view in that front row is breathtaking, as well as going up the lift. This is only B&M dive coaster I've been on, so I don't have much to compare it to, but I do like that layout-wise it has more to offer than pretty much any other B&M invert. This is not a B&M invert, pretty much any other B&M dive coaster out there. The first implement is super fun just because of how massive it is. The last inversion, that really slow barrel roll, corkscrew, 0G roll, whatever it is type thing. I'm so good at explaining things. Some of the best and honestly most comfortable hang time out there. It doesn't hold you upside down so long that you feel like you're going to pop a blood vessel in your head, but it's slow enough to be super trippy. And then the last little airtime hill gives some really good floater. I know people say that it doesn't give any airtime. I'd say it gives about as much floater as a B&M Hyper. I really enjoy this ride. A couple negatives. I think on the outside seat it has a pretty bad vibration. It has given me a headache a couple of times. And then some people don't like the vest restraints. I'm indifferent. I appreciate the fact that you don't get any headbanging, and I don't find them to be that restrictive. So overall, Valravn, super fun ride. Any other park would be a star attraction. At Cedar Point, it's number 7 for me. Next up is a ride that would not even dare be in most people's top 10, let alone number 6 on their list, but this is Rougarou. A lot of people don't like this ride, and I hear the main complaint with this is that it's rough and janky. I can understand how they think that if they sat in the front row. I found that on floorless coasters, the front row is insanely rough. I mean, if you just watch the train go by, you can see the train shuffling side to side and riders smacking their head in the front row. So that's why we rode back row every single ride. Really, really smooth back there. I can't personally think of a single negative about Rougarou. I'm pretty sure it's my favorite floorless coaster that I've been on. I think it has probably the most unique layout. It's the most intense floorless coaster I've ever been on. Just how fast paced it is when it goes through those inversions and all of its its other elements is fantastic. Since this was a stand-up coaster, it has a lot of elements that you would not typically find on a B&M floorless coaster. For example, my favorite element is that inclined loop just because of how forceful it is. It also has a couple really snappy transitions towards the end, which I really, really like. It adds some nice variety to the ride. And then some decent floater airtime as well on the first drop and the drop off the mid-course. So I think it has a very, very good variety of forces and elements to offer. I would just highly recommend riding in the back row. Alrighty, and to crack into the top 5, we have our third B&M in a row. And again, y'all are going to be like, what are you doing? That shouldn't go there. That should be way lower on the list this time. GateKeeper. Now, I know a lot of people, like Taylor from Coaster Studios and like every single one of his fans, like to say that this coaster is forceless, but I didn't find that to be the case at all, especially after that wing over drop, which by the way is incredible. Front or back row. Front row, you dangle over it. Back row, you get yanked through it. But right after that drop, you pull a lot of good positive G's. Going up the lift, you have a fantastic view, especially if you're sitting on the left side, I believe is a side. But the overall ride experience aside from that, usually super smooth depending on the day, depending on the terrain. Also, inside seat is a little bit smoother. I think it has 7 inversions, but it also still manages to pack a couple of airtime hills in there as well. So again, decent variety. The first huge airtime hill provides some really nice floater, especially sitting in the back row. Also, those near miss elements are really fantastic. And all the inversions are super fun and graceful. And this is just an enjoyable, somewhat relaxing ride. All right, now we're getting to a ride that's a little bit more intense than a B&M wing coaster. Does it have positives? No. Is the whole ride great? No. I only really enjoy about half of it, but this is Magnum XL-200. Wow, is this ride something just stupid. This is another one that I'll let someone else describe for me real quick, my buddy Garrick.
It's not a good ride.
Yeah.
But it is a very fun ride.
Again, just to talk about the lift hill, I don't think I've talked about lift hills this much in any video so far, aside from maybe that one. But the view of the ocean, again, so good. And the lift hill is so slow that you have plenty of time to take in that breathtaking view. The ride experience, though, doesn't really do a whole lot noteworthy until the finale. Going down that first drop, you don't get many forces. First airtime hill doesn't really do much. Airtime hill after that, really good floater, especially in the front, especially if it's running fast, if you have a full train. The turnaround is probably the jankiest part of the ride and most uncomfortable. It also does have trims there, which if they kick in, will make the end of the ride not as intense. Which could, depending on how you feel about ejector airtime, could make the ride more enjoyable or less enjoyable. But then you start to hit the small airtime hills. Most of them are triangular in shape, which again is dumb, but fun. Right before you hit those triangle airtime hills, you have this sort of floater hill that's turning to the left, which I really like. It gives you laterals with floater airtime. I think it's a fantastic sensation. But then after that, I think you have about 4 or 5 ejector hills. Some of them are in tunnels, and all of them just send you out of your seat. On a fast ride, it is the most intense ejector airtime out there, and on a slower ride, it's still intense ejector airtime, and it gets 2 thumbs up from me. Next up is a little more modern of a coaster, but at number 3, we have Millennium Force. I feel like there's sort of 2 camps on this ride. The people that think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and the people that think it's the most overrated thing since sliced bread. Interestingly enough, I fall into both camps. The first year I rode this, I don't know why, but it was running way slower than my second visit to Cedar Point. The first time I rode it, crawled over those airtime hills. They didn't offer any airtime whatsoever. And then the rest of the ride was just fast, I guess. This year, I got about 4 front row rides, and that completely changed my opinion. It was also running way faster. Almost every time we would hit those airtime hills, you get a brief pop of ejector and then sustained floater, which is just an incredible experience. That last little airtime hill always hits you with a little pop of ejector as well. And in the front, you get to feel the speed. In the back row, you don't feel the speed. Too many seats in front of you, man. I do also find this ride very enjoyable in the middle. In the middle, you get the most consistent floater airtime. It is definitely worth it to wait the sometimes extra half hour, which I know seems excessive. And if you don't want to wait for the front row, this ride does have staggered seating. So second row, you'll get pretty close to a front row ride. But element-wise, this ride really doesn't do all that much. However, the way it maintains its speed and the wind blowing in your face, the massive first drop, all of these things make it just a really enjoyable ride. And it's good enough to be number 3, in my opinion. Now we're getting into the really, really, really good stuff. We have a much more intense Intamin now. Maverick. Maverick. Aside from bringing down half of our trip last year, this thing is incredible. The first time I rode it, I had no idea what was coming at me. I knew that steep drop would give some good airtime. It was way better than I expected. You hit that first turnaround, and then you hit the transitions. You go from here to here. And if you're wearing a hat, that'll happen. By the way, I got a haircut. Do I look white trash or what? I had never felt whip like that before, and it was glorious. Upon my first time riding it, I thought it was better than Steel Vengeance, just because I had never felt anything like that before. It is still one of the most unique coasters out there. I don't think you have any small, compact coasters that combine these style of forces quite like Maverick. I'd say the closest thing are the RMC Raptor models, but those pack a little more ejector, as where Maverick has more fantastic laterals and a launch. So between the 3 fantastic ejector airtime hills, the multiple insanely whippy transitions, including those stangle dives, which, by the way, are some of the most intense elements on any coaster ever, and also that fantastic launch, as well as some decent positives at certain points throughout the ride, Maverick is, as theme park crazy might say, a wonderful buffet of fantastic forces. Number 1, Steel Vengeance. If Steel Vengeance is your number 1, you're basic. If Steel Vengeance is not your number 1, you're just trying to be edgy. So there's no winning. But yeah, Steel Vengeance is great. If you're a coaster enthusiast, you've either been on this ride or you've watched the POV 100 times and watched like every single review there is about it. So I don't really need to talk about it all that much. But just real quick, my personal opinions on it. I don't really think it does any one thing better than any other coaster out there, with the exception of the amount of airtime moments. There's not any single element that is really mind-blowing. The Outer Banked Hill is really cool. I really love that first inversion, especially sitting in the front row. The whip on that is great. But to me, the thing that makes Steel Vengeance one of the best coasters, if not the best coaster in the world, is just the fact that it never lets up. It is such a long ride, and during the entire duration, it is always doing something. I'd say it has a really good variety of elements. Most of them, if not all of them, are airtime focused, which I don't personally have a problem with. But just the fact that this ride lasts for like over a minute, it feels like 2 minutes. It feels like it'll never let up. You get your money's worth with this thing. It just keeps going and going and going and going. Not to mention that night rides on this thing are absolutely spectacular. Flying in and out of the wood structure when it's all lit up is phenomenal. I think this ride definitely deserves the hype that it has gotten, but I will say go into it with no expectations, because I was like the slightest bit disappointed going into it because I just expected it to automatically be the best coaster I'd ever been on. But yeah, it's good. And with that, we're done. Go ahead and comment down below what you think of my list. Is it stupid? Is it good? Is it stupidly good? As well as let me know what your guys' personal top 10s are. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And of course, as always, 2 thumbs down if you didn't like it. Go ahead and subscribe for more content like this. I will have a review and ranking of Waldemir's coasters coming up soon, as well as a top 10 list for Magic Mountain. So go ahead and subscribe if you don't want to miss those. But again, really thank you guys for watching. And this is the end of the video.